Today we are talking with Lisanne Maatman and Dumky de Wilde from DEPT Agency about testing in a post-cookie world. Lisanne is team lead for the Insights team, which covers both CRO and web analytics, and Dumky is a senior technical analyst with a background in philosophy. My name is Guido Janssen and welcome to CRO Café, the award-winning podcast where I show you the behind the scenes of optimization teams and talk with their specialists about data and human-driven optimization and implementing a culture of experimentation and validation. In case you missed it, in the previous English episode, we spoke with Elise Mail about the 6 soft skills that you as a CRO need to master. You can listen to that episode on CRO Café website or in the podcast app that you're listening with right now. Now, before we start, you just heard me saying something about award-winning podcast. Last week was the first edition of the Experimentation Culture Awards, and I'm honored to have been announced as the winner for the individual category for evangelizing CRO in general and CRO culture in particular with the CRO Café podcast. I was already surprised to be nominated, to be honest, for the top 5, so you can imagine my surprise when they announced me actually winning the award. So a big thank you goes out to the organization and the jury of the awards. I'm honored to be able to reach so many people in our industry each week through this podcast, and I love how it not only shows the big awesome things that we all do, but also gives a voice to the more introverted people and the mundane stories of everyday CRO. The depth of knowledge and the amazing stories of all my guests keep surprising me, and not infrequently these are stories from people that don't necessarily want to go on stage or write a long blog post or record a video of themselves. But they are comfortable with doing it in just a normal one-on-one conversation with a fellow CRO practitioner who knows about the struggles and just happens to have a big record button and a microphone. And they are able to share this with us all and spread their knowledge for us all to enjoy. So despite this being an individual award, I really feel that we won. This is a testament to the openness of all my guests in the past 2 years that often for the first time shared their story with the world. It's been my honor to be your host, and I will definitely continue doing so, but it's the stories of my guests that make the podcast. And this is also for you, as a listener of the podcast. You always want to know more. You want to keep learning, and you're open to changing your mind, changing your way of working. And I love that you help keeping me growing this community. Thank you all for that. Now let's get started with this episode of CRO Café, which again is made possible by our partners Online Dialogue, SiteSpect, Online Influence Institute, Content Square, and Convert.com. Welcome to Season 2, Episode 39. Lisanne and Dumky, welcome to the CRO Café. And of course, we'd like to start with getting to know you guys a bit better. So let's start with Lisanne. Could you tell us a bit more about what you do at DEPT?
So I am the team lead of the Insights team at DEPT, and that is the team that does both CRO but also a lot of web analysis. And together with my colleagues, I work for pretty wide variety of clients, so a lot of B2C, really e-commerce platforms, but also more traditional B2B, so and everything in between.
Okay.
So that's what I do.
Is there a specific niche that is aiming for, or like I said, you have a very broad range of clients, but is there a specific niche or something you end up with having as a client?
No, not really. I think the cool thing of working, especially in the CRO team at DEPT, is that we have this wide variety. So my typical day consists out of doing very B2C focused clients first, and then I'll move over to something very specific B2B with like a very long customer journey or very complex services or products. So I think that makes it cool to work there as well, to have that variety in your work.
Okay. And then Dumky, technical analyst, does that mean you have to fix all the mess that the clients made, or?
Yes, definitely. It's interesting though, because I tend to look at my job as on the one hand very technical. So it's analytics implementations, tracking implementations, tech management, connecting data sources, that kind of stuff. But usually what you end up talking about with clients is, okay, how are we going to make this actually work within your organization, build a process around it, have the proper governance, who can publish what, that kind of stuff. So it's technical on one side, but definitely also solving a lot of how do you say, like the challenges with the clients. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So what do we say if you, for new clients? What are the most common technical issues or technical things that you need to do first before you can actually start doing before Lisanne can do her work?
So it's actually what I see most often is just an understanding of what is it that we actually want to do? What is it that we actually want to measure, that we want to experiment with? So really getting that down and getting sort of all stakeholders aligned within an organization to say, okay, this is our goal. This is the goal that we can agree upon together, and then start building out the solutions and picking the right tools for the job and the right budget for that. That's really one of the most common challenges in terms of organization. In terms of practical challenges, I would say just getting rid of all the legacy. That's usually, especially if you look in tag management containers, for example, you will find like 200 different tags, and like 150 of them are not used or not like put in optimally. So they'll just, it's an interesting test. I did this at a client once where we just removed 150 of these tags and then looked at the difference in speed for the actual end user. And we shaved off about like 3 to 4 seconds. So that was an interesting test in and of itself.
That's a relatively easy fix.
Yeah,
that's nice. That's interesting. Yeah. So and yeah, of course, when we talk about CRO and technical side of things, there are quite some things happening. Last couple of months, last couple of years is the move away from using cookies for this. So Lisanne, how is this impacting basically your whole work?
Yeah, it does quite a lot, actually.
Can you still do your work?
The thing is, this is a very tricky thing, I guess. So you can do your work and you can look at the data, you can run your A/B test and not notice there's anything going on, right? So if you would not know that there is an issue with cookies, you would just go on, make your analysis and think you're doing the right thing.
Yeah.
But actually, you're looking partly at, invalid data. So yes, you can still do your work, but at this point, without having the proper solutions in place, it does take a lot of fixes to get the right data. To get the right data in place. So one thing is, for example, in our analysis, we always look at what the number of sessions are that people have to have before they convert, or the number of days before people convert. Obviously, when you look at those type of reports nowadays, those will consist out of invalid data. And again, that depends a bit upon your client. As I mentioned, we have a pretty wide variety of clients, and what I see in traditional business to business, that there's a complete different set of browsers that are being used. A lot of Chrome, for example, where this issue isn't taking place just yet. Mm-hmm. But we also have clients that sell, for example, Apple accessories. So obviously you have a lot of Safari traffic there. And especially for those clients, we see that those reports are missing more and more data, basically. And that's just the analysis part of things. Yeah. And then, of course, you have your A/B tests. So at this point, for many of my clients, I recommend to not run tests for longer than a week, which means that you have very little data to work with. If you do want to expand your runtime of A/B test, you'd have to look to browsers like Chrome and more or less assume that Chrome users are also representative for Safari or Mozilla Firefox users. So it does take a lot of fixes and double checking things to make sure that you're looking at actual valid data.
Marketing budgets have suffered, and the share for A/B testing has been impacted too. If you want to keep testing to enterprise standards, but save 80% on your annual contract, you can consider Convert.com. With their summer release, you can take advantage of full stack and hybrid features, strong privacy compliance, no blink, and enterprise-grade security. Feel good about your smart business decision. Invest what you save back in your CRO program. check out www.convert.com/2020. And Dumky, in case people are listening, I hope not, but in case people are listening and now thinking, shit, say what? What's happening? What is happening? Why are browsers doing this?
Yeah, so it really, I think it's down to two parts. So we've seen the sort of a legislative part, right? We've seen the GDPR and the EU trying to limit the amount of tracking that's happening online. Right. So it used to be the case that it was really easy for any kind of ad platform to set a cookie. So Facebook could set a cookie when they're on your website. They could set a cookie on the Facebook domain, and that means that you can be tracked across all other sites that are also using the Facebook library and setting cookies on the Facebook domain. Then we had the EU saying, okay, that's not really what we want for our citizens. Let's do something about that. But it just went on. And I think what Apple has done, and really they've been the lead on this, whether, because they think it's a good cause or because they think it's gives them a competitive edge, we don't know. But in any case, they took up the support for their users and said, hey, this is not what we want for our users. We're going to protect our users from these practices. And they started the intelligent tracking prevention. It's been going on for a few years, but in the last year, they really doubled down on it and said, this whole third-party cookie thing, we're just going to block third-party cookies altogether. So no retargeting, no remarketing. And also, as a sort of collateral damage, you could say the first-party cookies and any kind of browser storage was impacted, really. So that meant that the identification that you could store for a user with their either the advertisement that they clicked on, for example, but also like login credentials and that kind of stuff was limited to 1 day if you were coming from an advertisement, or 7 days if you're not coming from an advertisement but directly to the site. And what you see is that this has been a really big step in what you can actually do in terms of attributing conversions, in setting, assigning experiments to users and keeping them within that same experiment. So this is what Lisanne was talking about. If you don't know that this is going on, it means that the same user can return within, say, a week or 2 weeks, and they can get assigned different experiments, right? They can be on both sides of the A/B test. So, yeah, Safari is taking up the lead to prevent their users being tracked, and you see that other browsers are following suit as well. So Mozilla Firefox, Microsoft Edge has been really mostly blocking third-party cookies, and you see that slowly Chrome is also following suit.
And so Lisanne, in my mind, there will be two main ways of dealing with this. One would be trying to figure out a way to move away from cookies, but replace it with something else, so we can still track users for the length that cookies would give us. Or the other route would be, okay, we need to change the way we do experiments at all. So we need to do that within the boundaries, the new boundaries that we have. Which way are we going?
Which way are we going? I think it's too early to really call any conclusions just yet. I mean, we see that this has been happening for especially the last couple of months, and a lot of solutions are being thought of, but I don't think we have a finite list just yet of the solutions that we have. But I think it's important to make a distinction here. So first of all, you have the short-term tactics, right? Just things you can do more in the short term to deal with this situation. So those are things that, for example, entails server-side tagging. So that is something that you can work on. But I think while implementing that, you at the same time have to look at more of a long-term strategy, because in the end, you can do server-side tagging, and it, of course, will fix some things, but you'll have to work to a more sustainable solution here. And I think when we talk about a sustainable solution, is really about building a more direct relationship, basically, with your visitors and with your customers. So meaning acquire more first-party data. And I think that's really something that we should all focus on is first of all acquiring the data. So creating more or less incentives for people to identify who they are. And that can be done via a login. I think that makes most sense for a lot of platforms, but also white paper downloads or any other way that you can, for example, get an email address and keep on recognizing people when they come back later on.
So as a consumer, we can expect more and more websites where the first page is a login page.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, you're already seeing that, right? I mean, look at when you go to read something on medium.com, for example, they have this like hover over it that says, oh, you want to log in with your Google account? Click here. It's really easy. That's really the kind of stuff that I think we'll start to see, as well as incentive-based logins. So, log in, sign up for a newsletter to get a 10% discount, that kind of stuff.
I guess consumers are getting more and more used to this a bit by using more and more apps. And for most apps, you need to log in anyway. But yes, still can be annoying if you just go to a new service. Or for example, just want to read something on Medium. Click on it on Twitter, go to Medium, and then you're forced to log in.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that's also a conversation that we should have as consultants, but also as a company. It's all about having the right KPIs, right? So this is also, I think, what Dumky mentioned, that of course, as an e-commerce platform, you want to sell things, but you also want to remarket people. So the first and main objective there is, of course, to sell your products, for example. And trying or persuading people to get them to log in really requires you to think of, hey, what added value can we offer for our clients and our visitors for them to actually give their data? So I think it requires actually us to better think about the added value for our customers. So what can we do in terms of shipment costs or in terms of indeed discount codes, for example? So it's kind of, instead of just using a cookie that we can implement really easily with a snippet and just throw it out there, it kind of brings back the responsibility to us as marketeers as well to better think about what are we offering our clients and how can we ask them to give out their data. So on the one hand, respecting them as well if they decide not to do that. So not setting that cookie then anyways. But on the other hand, if they decide to give their data to you as a company, to make sure that you really add value for them.
So I guess in that sense, online is starting to look more and more like the traditional offline marketing, that we actually need to build a relationship with our clients.
Yeah, horribly. Yeah, no, yeah, but I think so. Yeah.
And I mean, that is the difficult challenge, right? Because as you were saying, Lisanne, you can focus on these short-term tactics and talk about stuff like server-side tagging, or there's all these kinds of solutions that will help you extend your cookie lifetime, that kind of stuff. But it's really about getting all these people within your organization together, right? The marketeers, the online marketeers, offline marketeers, the designers, someone with a user experience background, and start to think about what is actually the journey that the user goes through and how can we add value in such a way that there is a kind of exchange where, they give up their email address or their phone number in exchange for added value. So that we are able to identify them properly across channels.
Yeah. And I think need to add a bit onto that is that traditionally we were used to look at cookies, and also therefore we were used to look at a very channel specific approach, right? So you'd look at your AdWords ads or your Facebook ads or whatever. And I think now also taking that first party data as a starting point requires you to really look from the customer point of view. So looking at that journey and their touch points and shifting that focus from a more channel approach or a platform approach to really the journey and how you can help them at every specific point to get the information that they're looking for or find the product that they need. So it's really about shifting that focus. And I think in that sense, also an opportunity for us as marketeers to really do a better job.
As well as a challenge, because I mean, how are you gonna test this, right? How are you gonna test it across all these channels and make sure that someone stays within the same experiment, for example? I think that's going to be really difficult.
So hopefully they're logged in.
Yeah.
Would make our lives very much easier, yeah.
For over 10 years now, Online Dialogue advises about evidence-based conversion optimization with a focus on data and psychology. We see that analyzing data and recognizing customer behavior results in a better online dialogue with your clients and a higher ROI. The team of strategists, analysts, psychologists, and UX specialists gathers valuable insights in the online behavior of your visitors, and together with you, they optimize the different elements of your CRO program through redesign, expert reviews, A/B tests, and behavioral analysis. For more information about their services, go to onlinedialogue.com. For the people listening to this and maybe have a lot of tools they're using right now, for example, like Hotjar. That we just mentioned. So is that, can we just throw them all away, or is there still a use case to keep using those tools, or do we need to look for alternatives, server-side alternatives?
No, I think it's still very, especially tools like Hotjar, they're still very much interesting to use. So I think we need to make a distinction here between analytical tools such as Hotjar, where you want your heat maps and your user recordings, and they're all pretty much session-based or even page-based. So there, it doesn't really matter that you're not able to recognize users after a week again, especially for those analytical purposes.
Yeah.
However, I think every time you want to start doing a personalization in Google Optimize, for example, or run an A/B test in Visual Website Optimizer, that's where your alarm bells or alarm bellen should go off.
Yeah.
Because there, indeed, you will have an issue recognizing Safari users or Firefox users after a week. So you don't have to throw them out. You just have to, for now, as long as you don't have any solutions in place, take into consideration that you're no longer able to recognize them. And at the meantime, also work on some fixes, for example, like server-side tagging or resetting the cookie server-side.
So, and you already mentioned, if you don't know, that this is an issue to begin with, you might not notice this. Maybe you notice that specific segments like Safari are becoming less and less prevalent in your analytics, so less and less users. But it might not be quite obvious why this is happening. So is there a way to figure out how much of your traffic is affected by this?
Yeah, definitely. So
there is.
I feel a buzz coming up. There is buzz.
Take it away, Dumky.
Yeah, I think what's interesting is, before we start to think about like what's actually impacted, just think about the things that you as a user can do and how that potentially can impact the way your analytics tool or CRO tool is tracking you. So we're not coming from an ideal world either, right? Because it's not just about these cookies. It's about, think about you're opening an email on your phone in, say, the Gmail app. That opens, if you click a link on that, it opens in a browser within the Gmail app. Then you're like, hey, I don't want to open this in the Gmail app because I'm not logged in here. So I click on the Safari button, for example, and I go to the Safari app, and there I'm currently logged in. So those already are two different users that you're tracking, two different sessions that have started, and it's actually the same user that you're tracking. And then on top of that, because you're going to that Safari app, you're storing the cookie there for 7 days. So, if I return after 7 days following that same link, I'm again a new user. And that's sort of the things that we need to think about. We need to think about actual human behavior and what does it look like and how is it going to impact our tracking and our analytics. So when you consider that, then you need to think about, okay, what's going to be the actual impact on my users? And you then really need to look at session-based information, because that's all you have. So you can look at, how many Safari users do I have? How many Firefox users do I have? And I've seen these tools where, people have been looking at, these many people are still using an older Safari browser, so you can track them in an older Safari browser. And I would say just assume that, within the next 6 to 12 months, everybody's going to update, or at least 95% is going to update to a version of a browser that's going to limit the tracking capabilities. So, looking at that, you can really see that if the number of Safari users and the number of Firefox users that you're are visiting your site, when it's really high, you really need to consider like the sort of action and implication that has for you right away. If the number of Chrome users is a little bit bigger, then you might say, oh, I have a little bit more time before, over the next 12 to 18 to 24 months, when Chrome starts implementing some stuff, I have a little bit more time to actually accommodate for that. So I think that's the sort of calculation that you can do. And other than that, it really depends on the business. So, for example, is it fast-moving consumer goods where people are returning like every month or so to buy something new, or is it a B2B business where someone like lead times are very long?
Yep.
Someone might download a white paper and then they discuss it internally after 2 months, and then someone else from the company comes back and they download a white paper as well, and then another 2 months later, they finally contact someone in the sales department and say, hey, we're actually interested in your product. That's a totally different story than, when someone comes back every month or so.
Yeah, exactly. And how do you guys approach this with clients where you see this problem popping up, that you see more and more tracking issues? I mean, like you said, of course, it wasn't the perfect world to begin with, but the problems start accumulating. And maybe you need to move to a server-side tracking solution. So how do you approach this? Do you make an ROI calculation for this, or how does this go?
Yeah, it's a really good question, because we haven't figured it out fully either. You could do an ROI calculation, but there's a lot of assumptions in there.
Yeah.
So it makes a lot of sense to think about the scale of your organization, the potential impact that you see, and we can make a sort of investment about what do we think that is actually going to cost to implement something like server-side tagging. And what you see is that actually the clients for whom this is interesting are mostly clients where, for example, they have a lot of different countries that they're serving, so their reach is just very broad, really. So with one server-side tagging solution, they could serve all these different countries that they have. That's a really interesting use case. The other use case is where there's a lot of input, for example. So by that, I mean, you have, say, an iOS app, you have an Android app, you have a website, maybe you have a loyalty card or whatever. You have offline stores.
A lot of touch points.
Yeah, a lot of different touch points that you can put into your server-side tagging solution. Really, that makes it more interesting.
Okay, so basically, you're saying probably the first clients to move over to this are the clients that already have additional benefits to using server-side, even besides moving to a cookieless world.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay, interesting. And are there specific verticals or other? Is it? Do you see, for example, e-commerce parties move into this faster than others, or?
I would say so. The clients that I've been talking with are mostly e-commerce right now.
Okay. Yeah.
Although there are some B2B as well, but again, it depends on the scale and the potential impact, right? So usually it's tied not only to because the server-side tagging is a solution for a lot of different problems, and it brings its own problems with it as well. So yes, it does help you to, for example, extend the lifetime of your cookies. But what's more interesting for a lot of parties is that it allows you to tie a lot of information together server-side as well. So for example, for an e-commerce party, you could think of you have product margins on which products actually have the highest margin, right? And you definitely don't want your competitors to see those margins. But with a server-side tagging solution, you could tie the database of product margins that you have together with the incoming stream of user event data, and then say, hey, when the product margin is a certain level, I want to send a conversion to this platform, or I want to do something different with this user, give them a certain property, put them in a certain experiment bucket, that kind of stuff. So it does open up a lot of new, potentially interesting ways of connecting user data with business data.
So Lisanne, do you see a whole new range of experiments opening up now that you can do more and more server-side testing?
Yeah, definitely. I think one of the biggest things is that what Dumky pointed out is that the situation that we started wasn't ideal at first either. So, of course, you weren't able to run experiments for any longer period of time than, I'd say, 3 weeks max. And at this point, I think having the ability to reset cookies, for example, from server enables you to run tests for a longer period of time. So to also for low traffic websites to run some tests that have less impact or less effect, but still be able to run significant tests. So that is definitely a possibility there. So that really helps. Yeah.
Yesterday's brainstorm was so good. I really liked Steph's idea of running that test on the call to action buttons. Making them orange will really make them stand out, don't you think?
Yeah, right. Do you want to design real A/B test winners and achieve enormous conversion uplift? Then stop brainstorming and take a scientific approach. If you can read Dutch, follow the steps in Online Invloed, the bestseller on managementbook.nl. Or enroll in the author's course and become an expert in applying proven behavioral science yourself. Go to onlineinfluence.com for more information and free downloads. Do you also see downsides on server? If you compare, if you want to run any experiments and you have clients to do server-side versus client-side, are there server-side limitations, or does it, for example, take longer to develop those experiments?
Well, there's a difference here. So you don't have to run your full test server-side to be able to reset the cookie server-side. So there are examples or there's tooling in place that will reset, for example, your visual website optimized cookie or your Google optimized cookie that allows your cookie to be in place for a longer period of time to not to expire. There are toolings in place that will allow you to reset that cookie's server side using your client side test tools. So using Google Optimize or Visual Website Optimizer. And I think that's for a lot of our clients, at least, I think the more ideal solution in this case. So you do have the easy setup, the visual editor, managing your test easily, but you are able to run your test for a longer period of time. So I wouldn't necessarily move over to server-side testing right away, but have that client-side test tool with the advantage of setting your cookie server-side. I think that will help out a lot of customers.
Yeah, that sounds like a nice intermediary solution.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
So Dumky, while we're talking about tools, are there any new tools people should be looking out for when switching to server sides?
Yeah, so I mean, the big thing that's sort of provoked this discussion online, if you're in this niche, then you see a lot of buzz around this going on, is Google Tag Manager server side, which has just come out in beta. And I think what's interesting with that is it's not necessarily something new. It's just that it's packaged in such an easy way that it's become very easy for people to set up.
Yeah.
But if you're interested in that, there's been quite a few tools that have been doing this for a lot longer. Tools like Segment, but also Telium has been doing this for a while. And in terms of CRO, I'm not actually aware of any current tools on that or new tools on that.
Yeah, well, I think that some of the existing tools, of course, are try to move server side, and SiteSpec is going has always been server side. So yeah, okay. So the tooling already exists. Mainly the tag manager that you need to look after in the first place, and then there are intermediary solutions for your actual testing tools. So if you're already using, for example, VWO, like you mentioned, you could still be using that.
Yeah, definitely.
There's no direct need to switch. Yeah.
You asked about the downsides of server-side tagging or resetting of cookies, and I think that's one thing that this whole thing started with privacy, of course, and also transparency about the data that you're collecting. And I think that is one important downside of having server-side tagging is that you'll lose that transparency, right? As Dumky mentioned, when you do it via traditional GTM, for example, you're able to see what everyone is collecting in terms of events and whatnot.
Yeah.
However, if you move to a server-side solution, you're no longer transparent in a sense about what is the exact data that you're collecting from your users. So apart from, the practical thing and the practical implications in terms of CRO, I think there's also more of a principle idea here about, so we do want more privacy and we do want more transparency. However, the solution for this trend that we see now is to move to a server-side solution that kind of loses this transparent way of working. So I think that is an important thing that we have to take into consideration.
Yeah, and I mean, you get totally new questions here as well, right? Because it's we used to not really think about ad blockers, but with server-side tagging, it becomes a lot easier to circumvent ad blockers as well, for example. So the situation that you can have is that someone has opted into your marketing cookies and that kind of stuff, but then they're still using an ad blocker. And are you gonna honor their use of the ad blocker? Are you going to respect that? Or are you going to say, well, they opted in anyway, so I'm just going to track them?
Yeah, that's interesting. Yes, it sounds very familiar to, of course, when we got all the cookie legislation. Of course, it sounds nice in principle, but if everyone's doing it, then all consumers have to click OK every website. And if you have 99.9% of people clicking OK, then it kind of defeats the point of informing people of what actually... What's actually happening?
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
So we'll see. We'll see how that plays out. So a bit looking into the future, or near future at least. What are the developments that you see in this space? And I assume let's start with more and more browsers that will start doing this.
Yeah, I think that's indeed the first thing that comes to mind, right? So Chrome will also in the near future move to a more privacy-friendly setup.
Yeah.
So I think it's basically about making sure you have that relationship with your users. So that all drills down, I think, to acquiring that first-party data. Making sure that you use those accounts and self-identification to track, but also to personalize. So I think apart from doing your A/B testing, I think becoming more personal to your users will be an automatic extension of your A/B testing program, since you now are able to recognize them better. And you want to also provide that personal experience throughout their full journey. And I think we need to become more flexible and kind of shift the way we think about traditional touch points like marketing channels and also measuring on platforms. So moving from that very much channel focused approach in which you optimize your Facebook ads, but do not look at the landing page, for example, or we optimize everything in our AdWords, but don't have any idea of what the messaging throughout the platform is. I think that will be the key focus for the upcoming months for marketers to start understanding how they can optimize that full journey instead of just one specific part of that touch point.
Yeah, in general, I think that's an issue with a lot of CRO programs at companies, right? That they're very focused on the website itself, but not necessarily across touch points. Yeah, and what you mentioned earlier, I think with Chrome, I think it was in the previous episode, it was Simo Ahava that mentioned that Chrome is their market leader, so they're probably the last one to move. Obviously, also because it's Google owned and or at least directed, and it's not necessarily in their best interest to move in this direction really fast. So
yeah, and at the same time, Google, of course, has a lot of first-party data themselves, right? So they're not really losing in the sense. So we're also relying more on platforms like Google and Facebook because they do have that data, and we need them to provide us with, for example, data sets of people that are interested in a certain branch or product.
Yeah, I think Google itself has a lot of data itself, but I think more of the users of their platforms like analytics or AdWords.
Yeah.
If Google switches off to all those privacy modes, all those users will have issues, I think.
Definitely,
really fast.
But what's interesting, though, I think, is that they are preparing for that. So what you see with Google is that they admit that, if they don't have consent for, say, 30% or 40% of your users, they need to be able to do something with that big part that's unknown. So they are starting to apply modeling and machine learning to say, hey, we've had historical data, we've had data maybe from different sites, and we can apply that kind of data for some models to predict what these users would have done if they'd given consent. So I think that's really interesting.
Yeah, to use the data that you have and see if we can use machine learning to, well, maybe not know exactly, but at least have some basic understanding of what they would have done or they would.
Yeah, exactly.
Any other developments that we should be looking out for in this area?
Well, so I think this is actually it's sort of an indication of the complexity that's going to only become bigger and bigger, right? So on the one hand, it's going to be a real challenge for small businesses, mostly where they just don't have the capacity to deal with that kind of complexity. They don't have the people in-house to think about, do I need to model for the users that don't have consented? Do I need to implement server-side tagging? Mm-hmm. At the same time, I think the companies that do have the capacity for that and are maybe a little bit more tech-oriented as well, they really have an advantage to just take leaps forward here and be ahead of their competition in that sense. So I think that's really the change that we might see in the next year or so, where a few companies will take that lead, and I'm curious to see how much of an impact it will really have.
Yeah, and hopefully, like you started off with, hopefully a lot of websites that are a lot faster because they have less tags on the website.
Yeah,
that would be nice.
That would definitely be nice, upside. And more secure as well, because that's the funny thing. Like we accepted a system or an ecosystem where it's so acceptable to just load in all these JavaScript libraries from third-party vendors, whether it's from a little bit more trusted vendors like Facebook and Google, or any obscure third-party advertising system that you're working with. We're just every one of these libraries is an attack vector for someone to use and exploit.
Yeah, it's insane sometimes. That's why I have this the extension Ghostery that you're probably familiar with, and they can show a pop-up with all the things that are loaded on a website. And some websites are just insane. I have a big screen, but sometimes my screen isn't high enough to load all the different things that are being loaded. So that's
and then Ghostery itself is sending data as well.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's also a fun factor. Yeah. So yeah, thank you so much for enlightening us on the current state of the cookieless, more and more cookieless world. And how we can move to a post-cookie world as CRO specialist. Final question I ask almost anyone: any books that you would like to tip to our audience, which don't necessarily have to be cookie related, but any books on digital analytics or CRO or experimentation or in it somewhere in that area?
Oof, good question. I'm not so much of reading books myself. I'm more of the blogs and like smaller updates that I kind of like and stuff.
Worked for me. Any blogs you recently or what are your go-to blogs for information on this?
Well, maybe this is a thing for quite a long time, but I recently discovered the thinkwithgoogle.com hub with a lot of knowledge there. So I kind of like that. And apart from that, let me think. Let me check my inbox, because there's a newsletter that I can definitely recommend for everyone. Let me see. Maybe in the meantime, Dumky, you have some tips as well.
I mean, you mentioned Simon Ahava. I think he just does an amazing job at documenting all this stuff. So if people don't follow him yet, follow him on Twitter, on his own blog, on the Measure Slack channel, for example. And he's everywhere. LinkedIn. He answers all your questions. It's insane. Really great guy, by the way. And I think in terms of there's two sort of books that I really like. If you're into more sort of data science for your business, there's a book called Data Science for Business. I have to look up the authors. Don't know them by heart, but it's a really great way to think about not only the data sciencey part, but really the business part as well. And that's really my main point in most of the discussions that I have with clients. It's where I tell them it's not just about the tools that you're using. It's not about the the stuff or the people you have. It's mostly about setting the right goals, setting the right KPIs, understanding your business, understanding the landscape, and that's really where I find Simon Wardley and Wardley Maps really interesting. He has a book actually on Medium called Wardley Mapping, and it really allows you, if you're into that kind of stuff, to think about this stuff from a business perspective, and think about where your organization is, where you're adding value, and how you can move that into the future. Think about where you're adding value in the future. It's not for everyone, but if you like the business side of stuff, then
so data science for business. I think that's is that the one from
that's the one.
Provost and Fawcett? Yeah. And the other one, the Medium blog, we will link to that one.
I found my newsletter, by the way. Yeah, I found it. It's called Benedict Evans newsletter. So it's especially when you're interested in things like privacy, everything more from an ethical point of view. And really, his essays are pretty great. So I think it's a good read.
Yeah, really great guy.
We'll add that to the show notes. So everyone interested in those reads, those books, definitely check out the show notes for links to that. Thank you so much, Lisanne and Dumky. Thank you for joining me on the podcast, and good luck with moving clients to a post cookie world.
Thank you.
Thanks. It was a pleasure, and thanks for the invite.
Thank you. Bye bye. And this concludes season 2, episode 39 of the award-winning CRO Cafe podcast with Lisanne Maatman and Dumky de Wilde from DEPT. Next Monday in another episode, I talk with Ricardo Tahar from Flat 101 about his experience with growing a CRO agency and the struggles that came with that, and also the mistakes that he sees many clients make when starting out with CRO. Talk to you then, and always be optimizing.